Jean wasn't sure what to think when Crow told him he was to help him train for the tournament. It was a development, and those things had a habit of being a little intimidating, if only because he was used to having an idea of why and when something would happen. Yang seemed enthused for obvious reasons, but he couldn't help but express his doubt and ask Crow why he wanted to train them at all. "Not my idea, kid," Crow said. "Osmond asked me to do it for you as a favor. I've just got nothing better to do." Osmond did. Jean's brow scrunched up as he tried to think of some kind of motivation. The headmaster never bothered with anything like this before. Not for him, Team Ruby, or even Pyrrha. "Why?" he asked. "What does the headmaster want us to train specifically? Wouldn't that be a conflict of interest with the other teams?" "No idea on the last bit, but as for the former, Osmond's worried you guys will have become a target after our last mission." Crow brought up his hip flask and took a long swig. "Normally, we go up against Grim and clear a town, and there isn't anyone who's going to complain about that. With the White Fang, though, and with the girls' actions at the warehouses, Osmond's worried you guys might be targeted." He shrugged. "I guess I'm going to give you some basic training, just in case things go wrong." The explanation calmed him a little, and John nodded without thinking, both given permission and agreeing with it. It was new and unusual, but Crow's explanation and Ozpin's reason made sense. They're correct too, not that they know it. Well, except that our team will be targeted because Adam is an obsessed bastard and won't leave Blake alone. Still, the training couldn't hurt, and the thought of his team having a better chance of survival set well. More importantly, nothing about it was suspicious. Ozpin's actions made sense. They were logical. Jean isn't fit to train yet. Weiss's interruption made him roll his eyes. Mitsuna hasn't given him the all clear, and I'm not about to watch him get knocked about by an older huntsman. Yeah, I know. I was there, you know. Crow chuckled and crossed his arms over his chest. I spent most of my time on the roof against that chick. Yang's head perked up as she looked at her uncle, suddenly a little more interested. How'd that go? She asked. She was a tough one, kiddo. If you see her again, don't let her size fool you. She was fast as hell, flexible as anything, and she has a blade hidden in that umbrella of hers. It's really more of a parasol. Same thing, Mini Ice Queen. It really isn't. Weiss went on. An umbrella is used to protect someone from the rain and so normally is a little heavier and made from waterproof material, while a parasol is to protect from sunlight and provide shade. It's lighter and normally more ornamental to provide. Weiss went on, tone lecturing, as Crow slowly looked towards the sky and waited for her to finish. Jean hid a small smile. And that is why it is an important issue, because she would be able to swing the parasol with more speed and the material should be easier to cut or damage. Weiss finished. She looked more than a little pleased with herself. Yeah, Crow said. Thanks. So, yeah. She has a sword, actually, so it's kind of moot. And you got beaten by her, Yang said. No, I fought her off. But you didn't defeat her. That wasn't the objective, Firecracker. No, the objective was to stop the train. Yang trailed off with a grin. Crow narrowed his eyes. Which didn't happen because she held you off. That means she beat you. Wow, you must be getting old. Are you sure you don't need a walking stick, old man? You'll need one once we're done training, he growled. Now get up. Not you, kid. I don't need everyone on my ass. Jean sat down when Crow pointed to him. The rest of you? I want you doing laps and warming up. If you're so keen to point out how a little girl was able to fight on an even level. Beat you, you mean? Yang asked. Crow growled. Then, you can have a go fighting against me yourselves. Now get to it. I don't want you to be able to say you weren't ready when I show you what a real huntsman can do. Yeah, sure thing, old man. Yang said, then laughed and ducked his fist as she jogged off. Weiss and Blake rolled their eyes but followed, the three beginning a fast-paced jog around the training field. Crow shook his head and grumbled something under his breath, before he sat down on the rock next to Jean. Bloody brat, You'd think she'd have more respect for the poor sap who had to burp her. Crow uncorked his flask and took a long drink, but noticed him staring at it. Want some? After you just sealed your lips around it? I think I'll pass. You saying I might have a disease? Crow laughed. That's cute coming from you, kid. It really is. I'm surprised you're not a walking ball of STDs. I feel ill just sitting next to you. I use protection. He used the best protection, in fact. Foreknowledge. Then again, most people couldn't quite rely on trial and error as a method to find out whose private parts burned a little too hot. Shouldn't you be warming up as well? What? You actually think they're going to be able to beat me? No, he admitted. But I'm just wondering why you're even talking to me. A combination of boredom and responsibility, I guess. It was kind of my job to get you through Mountain Glen in one piece. Crow huffed. I didn't do a very good job there. You just said that girl was strong. It's not like any of these three could beat her. Maybe, maybe not. But you got captured before that. You going to tell me why you wandered off and got caught anyway? I saw something, Jean said. Liar. Crow took another drink. Zui would have raised hell if anyone or anything came near. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, kid. It's not like you did anything that you could get in trouble for. Not when it ended up discovering the breach and saving Vale. So, this wasn't an interrogation. His shoulders relaxed a little. It was probably his paranoia acting up again. But he already knew Crow's reason for training. Maybe he really was just talking out of boredom. What are you going to teach my team? He asked. Teach is a strong word. Osmond asked me to train them, not teach. He grinned and stroked his stubble. I'm going to make them fight me, 3-on-1, and then I'm going to kick their asses, but make sure Yang suffers a particularly humiliating defeat. Then I guess I'll give him some pointers and make him square off against one another. Childish, embarrassing, yet also useful. The training fit Crow to a T, and Jean laughed. It was so easy to see the relation between Crow and Yang. He wondered what life might have been like if they were both the same age. That thought was pretty terrifying. I can't train you, not yet anyway. Crow continued, but I suppose you can watch and get a feel for their fighting styles. You're the leader of the team, so it'll be up to you to put your mind to use come the tournament. Crow showed him an amused look. I've heard about some of your spars. How much do I need to pay you to pull something like that off in one of your matches? A get out of being killed by Galinda card would be nice. I doubt she'd appreciate it. Damn shame. Between you and me, kid, the whole tournament is a bit of a joke. It's a bunch of kids fighting against one another like it matters, like the glory means a damn thing out in the real world. It's painful to watch for a proper huntsman too. You're not good enough, you don't have the right mindset. He paused to shoot Jean a knowing smile. Well, they don't at least. The right mindset is holding a taser against someone's crotch? The right mindset is doing whatever needs to be done in order to win. Crow said. Besides, didn't your girlie tell you how she did the same to Torchwick? That caught his attention. Jean looked towards the older huntsman with wide eyes. No, he said. Wait, one of them zapped Torchwick in the balls? Little Miss Brooding, Crow said. It took him a second or two to figure out he meant Blake, and it was only because he already had a nickname for Weiss. From the sounds of it, she'd have been dead if you didn't bring that thing along. I guess she took a page from your book. I take it you're not going to explain why you brought that either? Jean ignored the question. Honestly, he was too relieved Blake had come out of it at all in one piece. I never realized she was in such danger. Come to think of it, they haven't told me much about what happened to them when I was out of it. It's all just been about me. Gods. He hadn't realized how close this mission came to being a complete bust. If Blake fell there, then the others would have stayed to try and treat her, and the Grim would have been drawn to the noise of the train and the tunnels. they would have surely died. Jean? Crow prompted. Oh, what? The backpack? He shook his head. Ruby and I raided the requisition room. It was just one of the bunch of things I picked up. Yeah, I know. Miss Goodwitch decided to confront me on that once it turned out you used my signature to get in. He shot Jean a dirty look. Do you have any idea how much trouble I'll be in if Ruby's dad learns I basically signed an order to let her have explosive ammunition? I'd like to live to see 50, thank you very much. Yeah. Jean chuckled. I'd like to live to 50 too. The feelings threatened to take him for a moment, but he quickly imagined Blake sticking a taser into Torchwick's balls and it vanished. She deserves something special for that. He'd have to see if he couldn't get her some premium tuna. Well, that was if his team let her go into Vale without an armed escort. They seemed to think just about anyone would abduct him. I'm just curious. What made you feel like you had to bring all that stuff? Crow said. I get that I said to prepare, and I'm not mad. But that was a lot for one mission. What was it? Paranoia? Fear? Something like that. My father always says there's no such thing as being over-paranoid. Ain't that the truth, kid? Thing is, most people don't learn that lesson until they've been under-prepped and paid for it. Crow sighed, as though recalling some distant memory. You ever fucked up like that, kid? Jean's face twisted. He had. Not recently, and not in the past repeats. But he could still vaguely recall some pieces of memory from the very first few. Back then, he'd been desperate and eager, convinced he could fix everything just because he had another chance. So many mistakes. So many people dead. He couldn't say that though. Not to Crow. No, I guess I just learned a lesson from having it hammered into my head. See, I'd rather you say nothing than tell some transparent lie like that. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm only 17. I haven't lived long enough to experience things like that. Yeah, sure. Crow poked him in the forehead. Those eyes were a little older than 17. I've seen that look in the eyes of plenty of huntsmen and huntresses. Funny thing is, it's never the happy ones. It's always the people who've lost something. I think you're reading into things a bit much. Besides, should you really be telling a 17-year-old guy you've been staring into his eyes? Jean shifted to the side. Should I be worried? Crow rolled his eyes and shrugged. Maybe. Who can say? Still, I said it before. This isn't an interrogation. If you don't want to talk, then don't talk. He sighed and stood up. No point lying about it though. Anyway, I think it's time to show my darling niece why she's a decade too early to be challenging her uncle. He coughed and raised his voice. Oi Yang, you ready yet? Yeah, we're ready, Yang called back. Are you though? Is it time for your nap? Oh, I'm ready, Crow growled. He took a step forward, but paused. Kid, I'm not one for niceties, or for talking depression stuff through. But if you ever want someone to share a drink with, I'll keep that in mind, Crow. Jean grinned. Thanks. Hey, quit stalling, old man. Don't tell me you're getting cold feet. Oh, she's in for it. Crow drew his weapon and stomped off. Yang's laughter echoed across the training field. They're so dramatic, Jean thought. He couldn't help but laugh, however, especially at how they needed and taunted one another. He didn't expect the three of them to have too much hope against Crow. Not when they didn't know his capabilities. Still, they stuck together as the match was started, and didn't let Crow separate them as he clearly wanted to. Jean sighed and leaned back on the warm rock, watching them bounce about the field with reckless abandon. Crow certainly stuck to his promise to focus on Yang. He smiled as she hit the grass and skidded across the field like a pinball. She didn't give up, of course. Not when it would mean admitting she was wrong. It just wasn't her nature. So typical of her, he thought with a laugh. She dashed in once more, eyes blazing red. Then again. I suppose it's one of the reasons she's so much fun to be around. In fact, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised at how much he wanted to join in. It looked fun, even if they were getting annihilated. Had he been healthy enough to take part, maybe he could have come up with a plan to help them beat Grow. Never thought I'd willingly want to join up in a spa, especially one so pointless. It didn't do anything to help them against what would come. There just wasn't the time for any training to stick. It was just simple fun. Maybe that was why he missed it so. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the grass behind him. His ears identified the heels of a woman. Pyrrha, perhaps? Is this spot free? His heart turned to ice. It was a sudden terror, overwhelming and sickening. He smiled through it, however, and didn't even look back to the dark-haired woman he knew stood behind him. "Sure," he said. "It's not like I own Beacon. If I did, the dress code would be oh so different. I dread to imagine." Cinder settled down beside him. She flashed him a friendly smile. As fake as she was, it would have fooled anyone else. She was good like that. "I've heard of your reputation after all. All of it true, I assure you." I don't quite remember your name." "Cinder," she said. "Cinder Fall. You, of course? I know the name of. You've become somewhat infamous around Beacon of late." "Because of the breach?" he asked, and awaited her nod. "I'd rather be infamous for something I remember doing. I wasn't in control of myself back there." "As I understand. For what it's worth, my team and I understand the implications of being drugged. I'm not sure how the other students can feel so awkward around you for it. It could have happened to anyone." "Thanks." She was being friendly, suspiciously so. With Cinder, everything was suspicious, and especially to him. But murder and violence were at least understandable. "She's trying to get close to me for some reason. That much is obvious. What's her angle, though?" It wasn't as simple as making assumptions. Not with her. She could be trying to get him alone to kill him, gather information, or found a route through to influencing Pyrrha. Heck, she could just be acting normal for the benefit of her disguise. As students of Haven, she was expected to interact with other students after all. The teachers might become concerned for someone who stayed cooped up in their room and never showed their face. That concern would draw attention, which she wouldn't want. Not that he would believe that explanation. This was Cinder. You did not take the easiest or safest choice when it came to her. Fortunately, he could find out more the easy way. "Is there a reason you wanted to talk to me, Cinder?" His left hand, on the other side of his body from her, clenched into a tight fist. Even so, he forced himself to smile at her. The rest of his body remained slack. "Not that I don't appreciate the chance to talk to a pretty girl, but it's normally me who has to do the approaching." "Charmer." She flicked some hair behind her and smiled seductively at him. "No reason on my part, though. I simply saw you sat here and I thought you looked lonely." "And you intend to keep me company, my dear?" The thought crossed my mind. "Why? That's very kind of you." Jean looked back to the spa and tried his hardest not to scowl. She followed his gaze. "You're not taking part?" she asked. "It looks like it. Is it because of your injuries?" She feigned concern well, and had no legitimate reason to deny her answer. He had reasons, yes, but none she wouldn't find suspicious. He stared ahead and nodded. "I see. I'll admit, I've never been under the influence of those substances myself, but it seems terrifying. Did you know that I was one of the ones you attacked?" She was. That changed things. When everyone spoke of him attacking friends, he thought they meant actual friends like Ruby or Pyrrha, or allies like Cardin. Maybe my mind wasn't completely gone after all. I must have seen Cinder as a threat, even when I could barely function. He hid his smirk and offered her a sympathetic smile instead. Sorry about that. I didn't exactly have control over myself. It is forgiven. Were it not for your partner, I fear we would have assumed the worst and fought back. You might have been hurt, and I'm sure that would have given you many sleepless nights. He shook his head and mumbled an automatic response, not really interested in what she said, so much as to what she meant. Words were tools for her, often lockpicks but occasional needles. She had an intent in approaching him, that much he knew. Was she trying to find out more about him? Had his behavior at the breach sparked her interest? It was possible. He'd always been worried about his team drawing her attention, ever since Weiss and the others caused Roman trouble in the warehouses. His eyes flicked back to his team, in time to see Crow wrapping up the fight. Was Cinder here for them? That was an even more terrifying proposition. He needed to keep her attention away from them, and if necessary, on him. Unfortunately, it appeared that luck wasn't on his side. He saw Weiss break off and jog towards him. Jean, the fight is... What are you doing here? He winced. I wanted to talk with your partner, Cinder said. I can assure you, I mean no harm. Weiss narrowed her eyes but didn't reply. She scanned the both of them, likely to see if he was doing anything inappropriate. But it would be a cold day in hell before he did that with Cinder again. Wait. Again? My man! Alright, let's get back on. She moved forward, and he cursed as he realized she intended to sit down between them, likely to protect him from harm. Jean snagged Weiss's wrist first. Her eyes widened in surprise, but he cut off her protest and dragged her on the left side. She squirmed, but went still as he wrapped an arm around her waist and held on tight. He felt her body go still, and then slowly relax into him. More importantly, he kept his body between Cinder and her. The evil witch watched them both with a curious gaze. Don't read into it, he pleaded. It's just a guy and his girlfriend sat together and cuddling. There's nothing to see here. There's nothing of interest here. Jean turned away from her and smiled at Weiss. Is the fight over already? How'd it go? The fight? Weiss seemed lost. Her eyes traced down to his arm, and then her hands, as she wondered where to place them. In the end, she settled one on her lap, and the other atop his hand which rested against her stomach. Her eyes didn't quite meet his. We lost the fight. We lost the fight. Mr. Brandon is a skilled huntsman, and I doubt Yang's taunts worked in our favor. I think she thought he'd make mistakes if he was angry, but it only made him fight harder. Maybe if she actually made him angry instead of just a little pissed off. If Crow had truly been furious, he might have messed up. And then again, it would take more than words to generate that response from someone so collected. He felt Cinder's eyes on the back of his head, but he did his best to look calm and casual as he talked to Weiss. What's happening now then? I take it training's over? He wants to see Yang and Blake spar against one another, and then me against the victor. You learn anything from the fight? I need to work on cutting off people's escapes with my glyphs. Weiss pouted. It made her look incredibly cute. His hand gripped her a little tighter. He was like Ruby, except not quite as fast and twice as slippery. Maybe some kind of maze, or at least some way of moving them in the direction I want. He could just smash through any ice structure you made. He could, but that would be a moment of distraction. If someone hits a wall and causes ice to shatter, their eyes will close instinctively to avoid any damage. That's my chance to attack. That's surprisingly vicious of you, he smiled. I approve. He heard Cinder cough behind him. Have you ever tried making a dome, or some kind of fully enclosed space? I can, but it's difficult. Such things take a lot longer to form, and I need him to be incapacitated or blind in order to not dodge it. Huh, shame. He laughed over another attempt from Cinder to catch their attention. I take it it's all limited by dust? Pretty much. Even though I'm the heiress of the SDC, dust has become quite rare that even I can't get hold of much. It's not a case of money. A lot of places are just sold out. I guess that's the... Excuse me. Cinder interrupted with a concealed scowl. It wasn't nearly hidden well enough to fool him, and that only proved she had something she wanted. I hate to interrupt, but I just wanted to ask a quick question about what we were talking about before. Why scowled at the other woman? What does she mean? She was asking about the breach, he said. She was one of the people I accidentally attacked. Well, she and her team, I guess. Quite so, Cinder smiled. They are all doing fine, however. You weren't able to injure any of them, and he wasn't in control of his own actions. Weiss shook her head. You can't blame him for what happened. He holds no responsibility for any damage caused. Weiss's frigid tone made him cringe. Gods. This was not the keep her out of Cinder's sight he had hoped for. Luckily, Cinder seemed more amused than offended. I'm not trying to sue him, Weiss. That's Miss Snee, thank you. I don't think we know each other well enough. Miss Snee, then. I was saying, I'm not here to insult him. Rather, I wanted to express our team's sympathies for what happened, along with our understanding. There are no hard feelings among us. We appreciate it, Weiss said. He appreciates it. Jean sighed and placed his hand on hers, pushing it back down onto her lap. Weiss, it's fine. I can speak for myself. He chuckled nervously and sent Cinder an apologetic shrug. We're under a lot of pressure. Sorry. Most other people aren't exactly willing to be friends with us right now. Cinder smiled understandingly. Perhaps that would change with a demonstration, she said. What? Drug me up and have me not attack someone to prove I'm not a psychopath? He winced when he felt Weiss's elbow dig into his side. She did not look amused by the suggestion. Cinder, on the other hand, laughed. Not at all, Jean. I merely meant that our teams could become friends. It might calm people down to see you interacting normally with people who you were previously attacked. Her laughter trailed off as she looked at him. What do you think? I think this means it's me or my team you're interested in. He cursed to himself and glanced back to Yang and Blake's spa, as though distracted. If she just wanted to cover herself or to find out if I was a threat, she could have done that without inconveniencing herself. By asking to be friends, though, she creates more work for her and her team. She wouldn't do that if she didn't think there was something to gain from it. Fuck. He'd been a fool to think she would put up with them interrupting her plans 3 times in a row. Cinder was adapting, as she always did. She was making plans now. How did he get rid of her without sounding suspicious? I think we'll be fine, Weiss said. His eyes flicked to her, but Weiss stared into Cinder's. We wouldn't want to put you and your team through the same, and we already have people we're quite close to. Thank you for offering, though. But I think we'll pass, right, Jean? Jean was quickly to try and argue, to recover before she offended Cinder, but froze. That was it. Weiss was a genius. He couldn't say no to Cinder because it would raise her guard and make her think he knew something about her. But Weiss definitely could. More than that, whether she realized it or not, she was playing the jealous girlfriend quite well. He could play the coward boyfriend just as easily. He ducked his head and laughed nervously. Yeah, sure. Sorry, Cinder. Weiss has spoken. So I see. She rolled her eyes and rose to her feet. Well, I can see that I'm interrupting a moment. I do apologize. If you change your mind or find yourself unburdened, She smiled and pointedly did look towards Weiss. And then know that my offer stands. For now, I bid you a speedy recovery, Jean. Get well soon. Yeah, sure. Thanks. He waited for her to move away before he dared to even feel relieved. His shoulders relaxed and he let out a long breath. He dodged a bullet there, but this doesn't mean it's over. Cinder isn't one to give up, and there's more than one way to find out about us. I need to make sure she doesn't approach Team Raven. Besides him, he felt Weiss relax against his side and couldn't help but smile. It looked like he wasn't the only one who felt less than comfortable around her. I wasn't trying anything with her, he said. I promise, Weiss.